Okay, hello and welcome to Digital Marketing Canada. This is episode number 4, and I'm your host, Andrew Schiestel from TBK Creative. Today's podcast is a two-part interview that I recently conducted with David Ciccarelli, the founder and CEO of Voices.com. If you're a marketer, executive, or CEO of a small to medium-sized company, this is a call that you're going to want to listen to. Voices.com is a 10-year-old London, Ontario-based tech company that as we speak, is experiencing some tremendous growth and expansion. And David comes onto this call today and shares very generously with me and you exactly how they went about growing the company to where it is right now and what actions they continue to do to continue to grow their company. The company now has around 60 staff, and in its last fiscal year did between $7 and $10 million in revenue, and they are targeted to grow to around 100 staff in this current fiscal year and to do about $10 to $15 million in revenue. So that, as I mentioned, they are experiencing just some phenomenal growth. It's great for them. In part 1, here's just some of the many juicy things that we cover. David shares how the company used their blog to position themselves to write a published book with Wiley Publishing. They're actually on the side, him and his wife, the authors of Voice Acting for Dummies. And David shares how they leverage the volumes of blog articles that his team produced over the years, now in excess of over 3,000 articles, to help them land the deal with the publisher, but also provide a lot of the content for the book. David shares also how they went about negotiating and acquiring the domain name voices.com from someone else. Surprisingly, they didn't start with this domain name when they started their business, and he speaks about how critical that decision was in the company's success. We then dive into marketing. David discusses the 5 marketing pillars of Voices.com, which includes search, social, mobile media, and messaging. In this segment, David generously shares a lot of content, so you'll want to have a pen and paper ready. He also covers why Voices.com chose to develop their own mobile app, something that a lot of businesses ponder and a lot of businesses don't move forward with for whatever reason. So David shares why his company chose to move forward with a mobile app in hopes that you can draw some lessons from that to help with your decision-making process. David also discusses marketing automation, what it is, the difference between lead scoring and lead grading, and more. And if all that weren't enough on this call, we cover a whole lot more. So without further ado, here's part 1 of part 2 with David Ciccarelli from Voices.com. Enjoy the call. Okay, so David, welcome to the call.
Hey, great to be here, Andrew. Thanks so much.
All right, so David, we're going to get into a lot on this call, but and we've been buddies for about 3 or 4 years, and I was really excited to have you on the call because I remember 3 or 4 years ago when we first met. TBK Creative would have been in business maybe about a year and a half ago, or a year and a half or so at the time. But I even remember, even like 3 years before that, even before our company was even around, you were out in the community doing social media type of training events, and you were really, I think, a first mover or first adopter, if you will, on the corporate end of Facebook. So I was really excited to get you on this call to really pick your brain around how Voices.com is marketing itself now, and also kind of comparing also to how it's evolved over the years, because you were there really early with Facebook. So thank you for being on the call. So maybe, I obviously want to dive into a lot of questions, but before we do that, let's start with Voices.com. Can you maybe share for the listener who Voices.com is, what you guys do, and some of the basic stuff, like how long you guys have been in business, etc.?
Sure. So Voices.com is an online marketplace. In effect, we're connecting businesses with professional voice actors. So the people that do voices in radio and television commercials, but nowadays YouTube videos, corporate training material, iPhone apps, audiobooks, phone systems. So anytime you hear the human voice, we're in effect becoming the soundtrack of the world, right? Yeah. And so somebody needs to go in to a studio and read a script and bring that script to life. So historically, where would you go to find something like that? You might call Betty over, an accountant, and say, hey, you have a really charming voice. Do you think you can be the voice of our radio commercial or our phone system? That was kind of the low-tech, low-cost way doing it. Or maybe you might call up a radio station and get one of the on-air producers. And if you're really savvy, you might maybe call up a talent agency in New York or Toronto or Los Angeles and hire somebody through a unionized talent agency. But fact of the matter is all of those leave you a little bit kind of grasping, and what we saw was an opportunity to bring together a really fragmented market, all these independent voice actors or voice talent, sometimes we use those terms interchangeably, and create an online space, in effect a giant portal where clients from all kind of walks of life can come on to the website and search for, audition, and then ultimately hire one of these professional voices for, as I mentioned, a variety of work. So the business has been around for about 10 years now, and it started just with Stephanie and I, my wife and I, as the two co-founders, and truthfully didn't even, back then, I think had big grand dreams and aspirations and knew it was a massive industry, and didn't realize, how big the opportunity was until you kind of just get into it and are persistent on a day-to-day basis, and you look back and realize, wow, 5 years flew by and look how far we've come, and now 10 years, and so it's still exciting to us just as much as it was in the earliest days, and we've got a long road ahead of us of leading and transforming an industry, so we're excited as ever.
All right, so you 10 years ago thought about and launched a company called Voices.com that basically connects voice-over professionals to people hiring voice-over professionals.
Yeah, exactly.
And you in a basic general way, you broker the deal. You use technology to even have the two parties even meet for the first time,
For sure.
Then they do business together. So just so people can get a better understanding too of sort of size of the company. So you launched 10 years ago. How many employees do you have now? What's your estimated revenues? Just so we
Sure. Yeah, for sure. They're great benchmarks.
Yeah.
Well, when we started, as I mentioned, it was the two of us. I remember it took us maybe 2-3 years to hire kind of employee number one and realize we needed somebody in customer service and support to help us out. Now we are at 60 full-time employees, and we'll be hitting that 100 mark within this year. So our, basically by summer next year, we kind of think in terms of fiscal year. So it'll be this year for sure. So that's certainly been a lot of challenges, and just kind of organizational and structural challenges along the way. And then in terms of revenue, again, kind of year one, I think we might have made, sold 18,000, sales for $18,000, not profit or anything like that.
Right, revenue, yeah.
So sales were $18,000, whereas now they're, this upcoming year will be probably in the 10 to 15, maybe a bit higher than that. Last year was 7 to 10 range, so this upcoming year will be probably closer to 15 and north of that for the upcoming year. So still kind of growing strongly, and it's a matter of just as I say, it really comes down to persistence and sticking to that one vision of there's this one little slice of life that we're going to dominate, right? This one little aspect of the creative services business that we feel that we can own, which is that voice recording, and being wholly intensely focused on that, you can build out an entire company, and that's our slice of life, and we're pursuing it with vigor.
Now, it may be that I live in London, Ontario, and you live in London, Ontario, but when it comes to voiceover, all I hear about is Voices.com, and you guys even are authors, I believe, of the dummies. I'll
let you know that. Can I tell you a quick story on the dummies book?
Yeah.
I wish I don't have one here in the office at my desk, but so I'm sure people are familiar with the Yellow and Black for Dummies books. It's okay. They're not meant for people with less intelligence. It's rather just an accessible, modular textbook in effect.
Yeah.
And so what we were challenged with a number of years ago was how to bring the brand voices from kind of the, the internet, the cloud, so to speak, and like literally put it into people's hands. And we were thinking, well, maybe we should, be at more events or get brochures done or do more print. But we wanted to have something lasting and that we could literally ship out to people to kind of have at least a better personal connection than just necessarily phone and email. And so we contacted, I contacted Wiley Publishing, who basically is the publisher for all the Dummies books,
Okay.
and found out that there's this custom publishing department, and basically you can license the Dummies brand. So I said, hey, we want to do voices.com for Dummies, have it this like little 50-page booklet on how to use the website, almost like a customer service tool, if you will. Yeah. And they said, well, hey, send us a book, send us kind of the project. They really liked it. And they go, hey, well, we've got an idea. Seems like a bit of an untapped market for us. We have acting and singing and guitar playing for dummies, but they didn't have anything around voice acting. So they said, why don't you broaden the scope of the book and put together a book proposal? So, of course, I do some research on a book proposal, Google around a little bit and see what goes into one, and put together voice acting for dummies, which is about as broad as we were comfortable with, and sent it their way, and they loved it. It went from Wiley Canada to US to worldwide, and we just started that project and finished it up last year. So it was honestly, it was all of our blog posts, and you hear this story so many times, people who blog for years and years and then put all that knowledge into a book. And it was really the same phenomenon with us, and I should certainly give the credit to Stephanie. She's the one who's written over 3,000 blog posts. Wow. Over the years. So she had lots to draw upon and lots of ideas that were well documented, and it was really a process of organizing that to fit into the dummy standard.
Okay. If you're listening to the call, I believe that was an extremely awesome little anecdote that David shared there. First of all, a couple of little nuggets that I pulled from that, David, for the listeners.
Sure.
They ended up doing a book deal, but the first thing I picked up on that David said is they literally picked up the phone and called Wiley, a major publisher. And I just want to really note that as you guys actually just took action on it, and you actually did it, and then they expressed interest in it. But the other thing I picked up on that I want to reiterate for the listeners is that they didn't necessarily have to create the content from scratch. They were drawing from over 3,000 blog articles that you had already produced that would have supported your websites and your brand's marketing to be able to provide educational content, great for search engine optimization, great for content across your social media, your email marketing, all that stuff. Yeah. So I just wanted to summarize two pieces of that story that you just shared there, David, in case someone's listening to the call who's saying, this could be a CEO or a VP of marketing who has had aspirations of writing a book, but just hasn't yet dove in and taken that next step.
For sure. And I think one of the things with that, if I may, that really helped out, again, we didn't go through the front door of Wiley and just say, hey, I'm a new author. We actually kind of went through this custom print as if we were going to be providing them with business. And we also had an ebook, which is another great kind of content marketing piece in and of itself. We had an ebook that we were selling for $47, and we sold, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 of these ebooks over the years, and had all done by PayPal. So we had, in effect, evidence that there was a market, and not just people who were downloading our ebook or looking at it because it was a free material, but people who are willing to put their money down and invest in this area. So that created a really compelling case for Wiley to take us seriously, which just helped out in formulating the book proposal. But yeah, it was one of those things that we're like, wow, this is taking on its life of its own. Let's go for it.
Sounds like a wild ride. Can you expand on, you said something there, you went a different route and you provided them value. Can you explain that more? How you did that?
For sure. Well, I think there's, that's probably more of a broad philosophy of life is answering the what's in it for me question. regardless of what you do. And whether we're talking, email subject lines to landing pages to ad copy to every single, status update on Facebook or Twitter, there has to be a compelling enough reason why somebody's going to click through or open or take that next step. So you're ultimately asking for the most precious resource, which is time. Sometimes we're like, hey, we're giving away this information free. And it's like, yeah, it might take them time to fill out your form and download it and then read it. So it might be free, but there's always these trade-offs. So that value that you're delivering needs to be compelling enough and succinct that in a split second, yep, got it, I want to move ahead. And so that's something that's kind of always running through my mind, is the person on the other end. It sounds as simple as put yourself in their shoes. If you were the one receiving this, article, the headline, like how are you looking at it kind of through your customer's eyes? And getting really good at that, and that certainly takes practice. But I think that's another one of those skills that's certainly paid off for us.
So when you contacted Wiley, and I just want to be clear about the steps, because I'm actually fascinated by this personally, so I'm kind of scratching my own itch here. But I know there's going to be listeners as well who want to write a book. So I'm in the planning stages of writing a book myself, and I'm undecided on if I want to go trade publishing or self-publish, or maybe I self-publish and maybe a trade publisher likes it and whatever, right? But that Wiley thing, did you literally pick up the phone, or did you do different steps to get in front of them with your book idea for the first time?
No, we literally picked up the phone.
Okay.
And found their custom printing department.
Okay.
Which basically means, hey, it's kind of like the hybrid between, rather than self-publishing, I looked at it as saying, hey, is there a well-known brand that I can, it's a bad kind of term, but like basically piggyback or kind of ride that wave a little bit? Like, is there a brand out there that I could be affiliated with that is already doing what I want to be doing? So they're publishing easy to read, nugget-sized books. Well, I can think of there's the Dummies Guide, and there's lots of in a day. O'Reilly has these like in a week, in a year, in a day kind of books. So like there's a whole kind of category. And honestly, it's a matter of like walking down to the Chapters Indigo or scouring around Amazon.com and looking at who are the publishers that are out there and just approaching them, because it sounds like we're the same, and I'm really big on like just take action of some kind, and like what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to be told no so many times in your life anyway. Yeah. And I feel like I'd rather just take that step and see where it goes. And that was one of those that did kind of work out. And trust me, there was lots of shaping back and forth. But yeah, literally once I found, Dummies was at the top of the list, and I literally just picked up the phone and go, hey, I've got an idea. How do I engage you for the custom printing? And then, we'd like to license your name. And then that's how the conversation started, which actually is where they get, from my understanding, they actually get a lot of their trade publication ideas, because the book actually got transformed into a trade publication, is that people pitch them these ideas all the time and say, hey, yeah, we're going to buy 5,000 books from you and get all these, test run. But then that actually turns into a trade book. So it's a kind of I always look for the side doors and the back doors in. You're trying to go in the front door with everyone else, you're just going to hit gatekeepers and stoppers, people who are trying to weed you out. But I always try to look for the alternative way in the gate.
And piggybacking on the Dummy series, is sort of like the analogy, why create an event yourself if you could just show up and join an established event or networking group? It's kind of
totally. Oh, exactly. This is a great example. Those people who are in London, I think it applies for anyone across Canada or North America listening to the podcast. It's like when when we were literally a two-person company and I had to describe like, hey, where's your office? I would always say we're above we're above Garlic's restaurant, or we're across the street from Stovey's Pizza. Like I give some kind of landmark that everybody knew, and everyone was like, oh yeah, I know where that is. And immediately like you have this other third party connection.
Nice.
It's like, I know where that is. That's really cool. How did you get that space? When did you move in there? I thought I saw your sign. Or
Right.
like there's leverage these like I'm really big on like landmarks or something that you can find in common that can spur the conversation on. And so that was just another one of those connections that right even off the top of this dialogue right now, I said, those yellow and black for dummies books, I'm sure everyone has seen one before, and then probably everyone's going, yep, I know exactly what they're talking about. And then now the conversation's taken away from its own.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so you guys are on pace to, or forecasting $10 to $15 million in the upcoming year.
Yep.
And just so I get a sense of then what that would be in terms of growth in the last year, what was your revenue previous on the previous year?
We would have been about 7. So yeah, I mean our goal this year is really, it's 100% year-over-year growth, which is almost what we've done over the last number of years. So
all right.
We build pretty sophisticated financial models and forecasts with a variety of inputs in order to achieve that. Like when thinking like what's possible, there's a stage where you need to move beyond, hey, just say, hey, we can just double this, next year. It's like, okay, well, you got to drill deeper than just saying times 2 on all of your forecasts. What are the actual inputs? And sometimes some of them are literally how much traffic is coming to the website, what are the conversion rates from an anonymous visitor to some type of lead or sign up, right? And then how do we go from there to spotting opportunities and then closing those sales opportunities or sales deals? So it's the stereotypical conversion funnel, but when we say, hey, we're going to double this year, there's a lot more kind of validity and weight to doing that if you can have the numbers to kind of back that up, and then you know what your targets are.
Okay, so on massive trajectory, you're forecasting 10 to 15 this coming year. Let's shift it a little more into marketing then. How do you guys market yourself? How do you get that much revenue and new subscribers and repeat subscribers?
Yep.
Continually coming through the system? How do you market the brand?
So I think it would be, if it's okay, I'd just love to share the story about kind of how we acquired the domain name voices.com, because I think that the brand itself is something that we certainly hold in high esteem. And we actually started under a different company name. It's pretty close. It was called interactivevoices.com, and so a bit of a mouthful. There was even somebody who once told us that their fingers got tired from typing this out too much, and so we're like, hey man, I was on this journey, this quest, if you will, of changing the domain name. And this is when Flickr and Twitter kind of launched, and everything was like bright and bubbly on the web, and companies were dropping vowels from their name. So I actually looked at acquiring Vox.com, and I put in a bid, foolishly enough, for $100,000 for Vox.com, which I totally did not have $100,000, but I figured I would, when we win the auction, that I would figure that part out downstream. So that didn't pan out. I looked at Vox and Voxy and Voxio, and nothing was working. And then it came out to, I'm like, well, maybe more of a name simplification rather than kind of moving in this whole new branding. So we looked at voices.com, just typed it into to the browser, and found that it was a website already registered, a medical journal called Silencing the Critical Voices in Your Head. So I figured, hey, well, at least it's not AT&T selling telecommunications or some other much larger organization. So I figured, though, if I send an email as david@interactivevoices.com to the owner, you do those who is lookups, those reverse lookups to see who owns it. You'd probably, up the price, because you go to, our website and realize that there's kind of a bit of a business going on there. So I worked through our lawyer, actually, who moved in across the hall from us that very week, and I asked him, hey, do you think you could send this fellow an email for me, ask him would he sell the name, if so, what price. And he came back with $50,000. I go, well, whew, at least it's not, it's half the price from that $100,000 I was going to spend.
Yeah.
And then went to all the local banks, and everyone was saying, no, why are you buying a name for $50,000? And eventually kind of, the lesson that I learned here was to never take no for an answer. In fact, go back to the fellow and say, look, didn't want to come off as totally lowballing. So I said, do you think you would accept $30,000 and I'll pay you $5,000 every quarter for the next 6 quarters? So he went for the deal. And so for the first $5,000, we were able to actually transition and literally like point the, resolve the domain into the new voices.com. Literally kind of copied all the files over from one server to the other and just like, ta-da, over a weekend, here we are, we're live. And everyone was super, super excited. And the reason I tell that story is because a couple interesting things happened. There's a proverb that says a good name is better than great riches. I've found that to be true. You certainly want to, if you have a great name, you want it to hold it in high esteem, as I say, because that's what people are going to remember you by and associate you with. And so for us, Voices is not only a brand name, but it's also a destination, and it is the product. So that made us a lot of sense. But there were these kind of these other elements, these surprises, if you will, that at the time we were spending about $5,000 on Google AdWords per month, and what was interesting is that the organic or the free side of Google, we actually were able to, because of the age of the domain name, which was a major factor in Google's ranking algorithm at the time, was from 1998, was the original registration, that we received a lot, like basically a huge boost in our organic traffic. So long story short, we paused the ads for several months, basically banked that money, kind of got the benefit of all this extra organic traffic, and because we kind of banked that money back in kind of the earliest startup days, we always had the money to pay off this domain name early. So the name I just kind of put back to like the turning point when things really certainly turned around for us, and it became something that everyone wanted to be affiliated with. Our voice talent wanted to be associated with the company, and clients, when they're searching through Google or they see something nowadays again through social media, and you're evaluating your options of 6 or 7 different services or the top 10 results on Google, and you see a company with this really strong brand and a short, simple name, it speaks volumes, as if like we've been there forever. Yeah. And so when you ask about kind of how we market, I have to kind of emphasize that the brand, and it's not just the name or the colors, or it's obviously so much more complex than that. It's all the touch points, but that it kind of comes back to that for us is what is this, is the way that we're marketing and the message we're saying and portraying out there, does that help or hinder the brand? And if it helps, then great, let's kind of continue down that path.
And I also hear why that's really related to marketing is it sounds like organic traffic has been a major traffic and lead source to voices.com over the last several years. And if you're able to turn off AdWords at one point for $5K per month, I imagine you definitely made back the $30,000 in the savings that you would have received from not spending that money on AdWords.
Exactly, and that was my thesis even at the time, that without realizing that the name was actually going to get the boost, I just thought it would be easier to market, like people would like more word of mouth kind of thing. But you asked a really kind of straightforward question. I'd love to be able to answer that. Is really, how are we marketing the company now? Like, what kind of channels are we using? And if I can kind of take a crack at that, I mean, we have these, I'm going to call them 5 really broad channels that a lot of stuff gets kind of sectioned off into. And so to kind of run through them quickly. So there's search, social, mobile, media, and messaging. So under search is the paid and then the organic, side of search marketing. Social, where we try to look at, I would say, 3 or 4 top social channels without getting kind of too spreading ourselves too thin. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and to some degree, Google Plus. To some degree, you could consider something like, even like Flickr in that space as well. At least kind of wherever your community is, you're going to have these other social networks, which I think sometimes people are just like, I must be on a particular channel. But you find, maybe there's the big 3, but you're going to find these other kind of sub networks or other properties that are up and coming. Pinterest as an example, depends on what your market is. So it's one that we found works for us. On the mobile channel, it's both mobile advertising, but also making sure that I call it putting stakes in the ground. So putting a stake in the ground by building mobile apps for iOS and Android. And the reason why you would want to do that, because nowadays, just as much as, I think 5-10 years ago, people would say, oh, just Google it. I mean, people still say that now, of course, but it's like, oh, just Google the answer. But nowadays, people say, well, there's got to be an app for that. And they go look in the App Store. And you got to have something there. It might not be, you don't have to spend $250,000 on your app. If you have something there, now you're present where there's a community, more than a community, a massive user base of people who are using the App Store like a search engine. Especially a younger demographic is not distinguishing the two. They just view it as another place to search for an answer to a solution to my problem. Media is, the way we categorize media is and this is, I hope this is kind of the meat and potato stuff that you like here, but the way we categorize media is under the 4 kind of form factors of digital media. So there's audio, video, images, and text. And if you think of anything you interact with, it has to take one of those 4 form factors: audio podcasts. With us, it's sample recordings of audio recordings of people's voices, so that kind of fits. But it's certainly audio podcasts, which we have audio podcasts. That means you get into iTunes, which means you've got another stake in the ground where there's already people listening to that material.
Are those educational, David, in nature?
They're all educational podcasts. We have 2. One is a company podcast called Vox Talk, and another one is we call it Experts. So it's the voiceover experts podcast, and those are all third-party contributions. They literally just send in an MP3 to us.
You're syndicated.
So yeah, a little sidebar. I mean, podcasts. What we're doing now is a way to do an interview-style podcast. But with this voiceover experts, we literally said, hey, we're going to create. Think of it like the donut. You got the intro. You got the outro, and you got this whole section in the middle. And so we have a professionally recorded intro and outro, and literally we just drop in the lesson, of the week. And it says like, and now for our special guest. And then the person introduces themselves. So, but I mean, this thing has 20,000 subscribers because it's material. We get a bunch of different contributors, people who want to demonstrate their own expertise. So that's a way that we can do audio. Video, again, whether it's a pre-recorded a webinar, could be product videos, could be corporate promotional videos, even recruiting videos. So there's different ways to do video, of course. Images, we take a lot of photos, but they're not just photos of the people here. They could be representative photos. You see a lot of photos with quotes on them, and then text, just kind of all of our written material. And so that's the media piece. And then the last one is messaging, which is really all of our email communications. And that's not lately, we've been really trying to create much more personalized kind of customer journey type messages using tools like marketing automation tools to which is a whole topic in and of itself, but ways that we can craft a targeted and a series of messages that walk people through a process rather than just everybody's on a newsletter and they all get the same newsletter. You know, that I feel like to some degree email is so powerful, but just kind of doing the one form, which is just email newsletters, there's other ways to do email that get really interesting. So those are the 5 channels: search, social, mobile, media, and messaging. And that's how we market. There's a lot that goes into that, but those are the big channels. Is that cool?
No, it's excellent information. Thank you for being so specific. I know that's going to be extremely valuable for people listening. When it comes to the Canadian anti-spam law, so CASL, I know one of the challenges a lot of businesses will have when let's say they have customers in let's say the U.S. where you have a little more leniency than we do now as Canadian companies. How are you sort of just dealing with all that kind of stuff with CASL? That just kind of popped up when you said the email marketing bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we did the same thing as every other Canadian organization did in the weeks leading up to it, which I think was probably one of the biggest criticisms. Was like, all you're doing is I'm hearing from all these companies that I've never heard from before asking for my permission, and there really wasn't another way around it. I mean, if people had email lists, if people had email lists that were untapped or, that they wanted to use at some point in the future, well, then this was the time to request that permission, which is exactly what we did. And we did so through, again, stating having some benefit statements on here's why you would want to stay in touch with us, and literally opting out everybody else and just suppressing them from future emails, which is what we had to do. So if they take action or they come back to the website, and it's in our CRM, our customer relationship management application, Salesforce.com, which we use. The email opt-out button is right at the top of the contact information page. So we always check, hey, is it available? If so, then great. If not, can we ask permission? Hey, do you still want to be opted out? We're talking on the phone now, and trying to convert more people to be willing to accept a message from us in the future, and then obviously just documenting that call happened and if they were willing to accept messages. So, slowly over time, trying to get more permission, if you will, from our Canadian customers.
Yeah, for those listening, one of the big differences in Canada now versus the U.S. is the way generally the way the U.S. law is that you send out an email and then you have to have an unsubscribe mechanism, but you don't necessarily need permission to send it out. In Canada, with the new Canadian anti-spam law, short for CASL, businesses are required to either have consent or meet certain exceptions prior to sending it out in the first place, which is making it a lot more difficult for Canadian businesses to be able to do that if you don't meet those certain exceptions or if you don't have consent. So there's actually three prongs I sort of wanted to take this conversation to, David, based on some great stuff that you just shared in the last 15 minutes. I want to touch on 3 things: marketing automation. I want to drill down a little bit more on content marketing, because I've been really impressed with the amount of volume you guys produce on a kind of a content marketing basis for several years now. And I want to talk about social media. When it comes to marketing automation, that's sort of a hot digital marketing topic this year. A lot more marketers are getting into marketing automation. They're trying to understand it. And for those listening, if that is somewhat of a new term for you, that's basically taking a email list and having better segmentation, so you're sending the right message to the right person. Marketing automation is starting to use automated tools so that you can send that person several very strategic messages at specific times. So can you maybe share with everybody, David, your team's approach so far to marketing automation?
Yep, absolutely. It started like most organizations probably start with, how do I just email a whole group of people? So tools like Constant Contact or MailChimp or a vertical response, which is what we had used for years and years, were excellent at doing that. What we discovered, though, was we needed to have, I guess, more of a dynamic nature to maintaining those lists. So that's really what we wanted to accomplish with marketing automation. So let's kind of, I'll share kind of the big pieces or modules of marketing automation. Absolutely. Maintaining your list of prospects and your list of accounts. Those are probably the two big lists that most people have. Leads and customers would be another kind of way to define that. But then within there, how do you get new leads? Well, often there's a form on your website. And so you can have that form feed into one of these lists. But as the person, so there's lists, there's forms for building your lists further in the future. And then there's this concept of lead scoring. And so lead scoring is based upon the action or activities, page views, form submits, downloads of various assets like PDFs and white papers, ebooks, and so forth. Based upon all of that activity, you're assigning points. Mm-hmm. So 5 points for a page view, 5 points for downloading an ebook. We sent you an autoresponder and you opened it. 10 points for that. And so that creates this score. So a score is really how interested a prospect is in doing business with us. The complementary element of that is called a lead grade. And if you think of it, it's how interested are we in doing business with them. So a great analogy was lead score could be the student who's doing tons of research on your website, clicking around like mad. Their score is through the roof, right? They downloaded everything that you've got, and you're like, this person's awesome.
Sure.
And then you realize, well, the grade, they're more like an F because they're a student, they don't work in a company, they've got a AOL.mx domain name.
Yeah, poor sounding voice.
Yeah, exactly. So all of that is really, they visited your careers page, they're checking out your job postings. Like, these are probably not good customer prospects, if you know what I'm saying. So for those people, you want to have basically the profile of your ideal customer. Hey, I want to be talking to the C-level people. I want to be working in companies that have 25 employees or more. They're doing 5 million in revenue or higher. And so the more you can kind of ask and acquire this information, you now start, get these grades. Suddenly the person's moving from a D to a C to a A+. This is an exact perfect customer grade, if you will, that I would want to reach out to. And that's how you can, that's something that marketing automation does in an automated fashion. Is these, instead of just an email address, it's running all of these rules behind the scenes and helping kind of the best, most promising prospects bubble up to the top. And so I think that's where there's a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah, it's huge opportunity for businesses that can really sort out the proper rules for their business. I got a question about that, David. Mm-hmm. So will you actually have the score start to also influence the grade versus them being purely separate? And what I mean by that is if somebody, let's say it is, you need to work with businesses that have, over 200 employees. Let's say you're selling enterprise level software. Maybe it's better to give it, I don't want to go into a hypothetical example. I'm going to ask the question, but let's use voices.com.
We run them independently.
Okay, you run independent. So the score can't necessarily influence the grade. The grade is just based on a profile. Are you profiling the person?
Exactly.
They're
Yeah,
great.
exactly. Now,
Okay.
different marketing automation companies do this differently. Most of them are going
Okay.
to have this concept of a lead score, and sometimes you can add that all into one. But what we found is, and we're working with Pardot, which is a Salesforce company. So what we found that they separate the two of them, and at least in my mind, I really understand that. And they gave me kind of this dating analogy is like, hey, I could really like you, but if you don't also like me, right, then it's not a good fit. And same thing is like the customer can really like us by visiting all of our pages, but if we don't like them, because then we're probably just going to be wasting our time
Right.
trying to call them 15 times to get them on the phone to make, as you said, the presentation for the enterprise software, because
Sure.
they're not fitting that profile. So for us, we run them independently, so some people theoretically could have actually a very low score. The busy executive might have visited 2 pages on the website, but they're an A plus because they filled out one form and they filled out all the fields that they needed to, and we know that this person is as good of a match as we can get, and therefore that would prompt us to reach out and contact them right away and understand who it is that we're speaking to a little bit better.
There's going to be people definitely, David, listening to the call. They probably heard of marketing automation. I know a lot of marketers right now know about it, but a lot aren't doing it yet, but they want to learn more about it. Can you provide maybe 2 or 3 action items? If someone's listening to the call right now, they want to get into the marketing automation game, they want to grow their company's revenue using that. What are those sort of 2 or 3 actions that you would do if you were them?
I think the where we started was certainly a lot of research. I mean, there's companies like HubSpot which do this to a degree.
Yeah.
Pardot. I mean, they're marketing companies themselves, so they create a ton of really valuable content.
Yeah.
And the content, because they're basically they're living the dream. They're producing exactly what they kind of tell us to do, right? Hey, yeah, exactly. So given that, they'll have, I think in terms of worksheets sometimes, like, hey, if somebody's going to give me like a getting started guide or a workbook, literally I just cleaned off my desk. I printed off these ebooks have these worksheets, and I just started filling them out. And one of them was like the customer profile, and starting to score kind of who your ideal customer. So that's where I started. But I would, there's lots of YouTube videos, both from pre-recorded webinars as well. But consider that that this is a tool. You're probably already doing a lot of these kind of things in your organization already. So it's just a tool to automate that process. So sometimes I call that starting with the no-tech solution, which is probably what most organizations start with, is you're doing a lot of this stuff, pen and paper, you got spreadsheets, it's not really automated, not connected, and go, hey, if we could rebuild this from scratch, what would that look like? And then you have your list of criteria. Then you can take that and, in effect, shop that out to the various vendors to realize, okay, here's what we're actually trying to achieve. And so, as I said, for us, it was really detailed list segmentation and have some automated rules to move people from one list onto another. And it was also these, lead scores and lead grading. And that was kind of our buying criteria that when we went to the vendors, some of them just stood out so far from the others. And that's kind of where we started.
When looking at software, it can definitely be, especially when you get into like CRMs and marketing automation tools, it can be overwhelming if you're in I know I've experienced this, you log in a trial period, you're not used to the environment, you're seeing all these different buttons, and I agree with what David's saying. I'm actually going through a review process, and we're going to be purchasing a license for a CRM soon, and we're looking at Salesforce, and we're looking at sort of the popular ones. Mm-hmm. But something that's really helped me in this process is that I'm actually I've actually created in a Word document the exact things I need this CRM to do, and then I've actually pushed that over to the associate, and then we're having a call this week, and I'm starting there this time when I'm going through my CRM sort of review process. And then I'll get into the nitty gritty and try to learn all the tools. But I want to start with what are my core needs first, and then I can start doing all the stuff from there.
Yeah, no, I think it's such great advice because that all of these really enterprise grade tools can do so much. It's like Word, Microsoft Word. Everybody just uses it. Like, what are the features you use? Spell check and formatting and save as a PDF and save as a different couple files. Like, I don't use Word for anything complicated. I got maybe 3 features that I actually really need it to do, and CRM or marketing automation probably falls into that same realm. It's just being really clear on your specifications so that it'll actually save you a lot of money down the road. The caveat to that, though, is consider what I call the upgrade path, right? So, hey, if I can get onto a platform that, yes, over time it does have all the bells and whistles, or I know I can add more licenses or extra functionality as I use the tool, that way I'm not paying for it all up front. I always try to go in and buy almost like the bare bones. Like,
you can get by.
Let me get
on the far left of their matrix.
Yeah, exactly. And if I can start there and see the value, because demos, they might give you a bit of value for the 30 minutes that you're on a call and walking through it, but it's like, I've really got to run my own data through, and I got to make sure that there's buy-in for a team. Once I've overcome that, almost like doing it as a pilot project.
Totally.
Then I can look at, okay, great, we're going to buy all these licenses for everyone, or upgrade our service.
Yeah, those demos can be frustrating because obviously they're the expert, right? And you're watching them over 30 minutes kind of slam this thing and it looks good, but you don't know if you can figure it out yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Been there.
All right, so Pardot is the marketing automation tool that you guys use for your basic CRM stuff. Are you using Salesforce, I take it?
Yep, we are, which is one we actually we were working with Acton Marketing Automation beforehand. Really, really great guys. Super slick tool as well too. There is, we over time, going on almost 10 years ago, choosing Salesforce, and 10 years ago Salesforce was like nothing like it is today. I mean, it was pretty rudimentary. But it was the vision for that product and that platform was so grand that I'm really grateful that, because now the company is built, our company is built to run on Salesforce.
Yeah.
So now my number one vendor criteria is, does it work with Salesforce? Like, if it's not like a native plugin or it has some amazing integration, then I tend to kind of steer away from those products. So it helps me be more selective in the tools that and software that we're evaluating. That's Pardot is owned by Salesforce.
Yeah.
So the integration is just getting tighter, and I can already see there's a lot of similarities between the two that just gave me a lot more comfort. So that was the reason for switching. But the big marketing automation tools are very, very similar. They have they do the same functionality that we talked about here today.
Yeah.